You want to claim host right away, so first of all, let's start video here. Let's start.
Does this have the host's key control?
Yeah, let's see. Participants. Claim host. So if you hit participants, right?
Got it.
Then the claim host shows up on the
Yep.
bottom. Is your number.
Bob, I typed it correctly.
What's your name?
Lisa.
Bob.
Bob. Hi, Bob.
You look familiar, but I don't.
There we go.
Okay, great.
And
I always unmute to start to make sure I'm not to be
On the Zoom.
They were all different on the screen.
So this should record us.
Helmet down.
there we go.
Okay, there you go. You should be able to see, there you go, and you're seeing them. Look at that.
Is it tiny inside?
So when you finish, you can just end the meeting.
That works. And is this set up for doing
St.
the
Kitts.
captions?
Nevis.
I think they all are automatic.
Cruise. My parents
I believe they all are, but that I'm not, I don't think you need to do anything
flew
with
into St.
that.
Okay.
Miami.
I never have.
San Juan.
Okay.
You have to go back.
The only thing is that where Tom is sitting is fine, but if you sit at the head of the table there, or at the foot of the table, you hit the camera. So this is our makeshift room here.
Okay.
And I always ask them if they can hear us. It looks like they.
Are you able to hear us?
Yeah.
Alex, are you able to hear us? If you can give us a thumbs up. We can't hear you, Alex. Are you able to hear us?
Hey, it's Lucy. I hear you.
Oh, good.
It's on Alex's end.
Yeah.
She can't hear us. Is there, if not anyone, any public member will come in and act up, is there a way to?
I think you can go, you can,
Silence
and you
them.
can mute them, yeah.
Excellent.
Yep.
Check them off.
From managed participants, we can have.
Do we have to do that?
There is a problem here. Town administrator isn't listed with the mute button.
That's no problem. It's self-mute. So I'm gonna self-mute and leave.
Yeah, you want?
Yeah.
I'll take that phone.
Kim?
Oh my God, thank you.
Oh, is he?
It was one block behind.
Took my husband's phone.
Next to the Herd School.
Thank you, everybody, for serving on this very important committee. You're all set.
Thank
When
you.
you're done, just end the meeting. Just hit end and you should,
Yep.
that's be it.
All right. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
So with that, we've got 7 o'clock.
All right.
I want your feedback on how this works.
Yep.
Thank you.
And so, as you probably saw, I've set the expectation, we will give you feedback on this as well as ask our participants. So we are over here at Town Hall, 7 o'clock. We will call the meeting to order of the Bylaw Review Committee. And people are still coming in. The automatic admittance appears to be set. So welcome to Bylaw Review Committee meeting for July 18th, 2022. For those of us who are in person, welcome. I'm Dan. This is what I actually look like in the flesh,
Hey, Dan.
I think. And so if the first thing we can do is just quickly go around, do quick introductions, then we'll ask for public participation. If anyone from the public wants to have participation, and then we will go through the agenda itself, which this meeting should probably take about an hour, preferably not much longer than that. So Dan Lieber, and if you can make sure that, if possible, that you're in this screen just so people can see you. When you're giving your name, the camera itself is kind of at the same height as the table itself. If you just lean in a little bit, just so people can see your faces, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, Tim Lilly.
Lisa Catuli.
Bob Vincent.
Joseph Pride.
Kevin York.
Eric Reed. Van Santos.
Tom Mullen.
Excellent. First order of business. is we will need ideally 2 people to take minutes, just so we can then do reconciliation afterwards. Who,
We go.
you want,
No, I think those, I
what was
think,
that?
I think Ann and
And you
Gentlemen.
willing to take minutes?
Yes.
Okay,
that was discussed at the first meeting, I thought, right?
yeah,
Yes, that was just for the first
that
meeting.
was,
Oh,
yeah.
I nominate you guys.
Ann's really good at
I'm just joking.
it. So Ann will have to take minutes from every meeting all the time, right? Yeah.
You don't want to see my minutes.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we've got minutes appropriately taken. Okay, and remotely, we have, looks like, if you want to each introduce yourselves, have to unmute.
Alex McCarowitz.
Catherine Howitt. Lucy Fox.
Excellent, and it looks like we have at least one member of the public as well that's joining us, but without a camera or microphone. They're welcome to participate as they wish. So great to see everyone. Thank you for joining. We've got a rather interesting agenda just as we go through and explore things. So first thing is, if anyone from the public wishes to comment on the actions or other elements, we'll take members' contributions a little bit later in the meeting. So I know that we've got at least one member of the public. If you'd like to speak, if you want to send a chat message through, or you're welcome to come off of mute for that as well. Okay, next thing on the agenda is the election of a vice chair. This was a suggestion at the last meeting, was to have the concept of a vice chair, especially where we've certainly seen this week strange things with the open meeting law. As I gave in email, there was a whole set of events that took place at the open meeting law extensions, and the provisions actually expired on Friday night and then eventually got signed back into law on Saturday, somewhere around noon. Having a vice chair in the event that I'm not available, or for those times that I'm really not available, makes it a more orderly transfer. And so it also will provide for assistance with coordination with other groups and so forth, as realistically, we will probably talk to every department in town. We'll probably talk to every committee and otherwise in town, at least through interactions, and to have some of that burden shifted will make things a bit easier. So any questions or discussions before we entertain motions for vice chair? Going once, going twice? Okay, have any motions? With that, I'm going to nominate Ann, since she's got experience of actually chairing committees, including the select board, to be vice chair, if you're willing to accept.
I am.
Okay,
And
we've got, it's been, the motion's been made and seconded. Other motions, other discussion?
the only discussion I would have is, I think we should put a time limit on both chair and vice chair.
By bylaw, it's actually typically annually.
Good, okay, I just,
Unless otherwise prescribed, and so where our term is until expiration.
right, I just wanted to make sure we had that annual end date in case anyone else wanted to step in and.
Absolutely,
Perfect.
and if someone really wants to step in, or for some reason feels compelled to, you can actually call for that at any time. That's actually all built into the bylaws now as a result of the last bylaw review committee. So important things specifically to handle
Thank you, Dan.
rogue chairs. Because, if I go completely rogue, and I can see Catherine is looking, saying, oh yeah, that's going to happen. Just kidding. So if something like that should happen, we've tried to put in guardrails
Perfect.
for that purpose. And if for any reason chair or vice chair cannot do it, they can request to step down. So we have a motion made and seconded, and since we do have remote participation, all votes have to be by roll call. So any further discussion before we entertain a vote? Those online, okay, with that, I'm just gonna go down the list that I have here. Alex,
Yes.
Ann, you get to vote
Yes.
Eric,
Affirmative.
Joe,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Lucy,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. That means it's unanimous. Congratulations. And you are now vice chair. It's yet another important notch to put into things. And the professional recognition that you get, we know that it is really, really important. More importantly, I actually do appreciate it. So thank you.
Absolutely.
And we've got full confidence. Okay, thank you, everyone. Much appreciated. With that, we've got the discussion of the minutes. The minutes were sent out and made available by way of Dropbox. For those, everyone should have access to it by Dropbox. It's a good way for us to exchange information. If it gets abused, we will change the permissions on it. So far, it has not been, which is a good thing. But if you need to have files for distribution, it's just a clean way where it gets archived, that actually periodically will just transfer everything in Dropbox, including revision history as necessary, to the town for official record keeping. So with that, the minutes were actually submitted by Ann and were were provided in Dropbox. They are also available. They will be available once they're approved on the website for the general public to review. Anyone from the public prior to approval is welcome to request them by coming to the committee and town clerk. So with that, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I have an amendment.
We'll take the amendments in a minute. First, we want to put the motion on the table. So
I'll make a motion
okay,
to accept the
Alex-
minutes.
Alex is making a motion to accept the minutes. Do we have a second?
Second.
We've got it seconded. Okay. So,
I talked to Ann at the beginning of this meeting. I think it's wise to put meeting one at the top, so you know which meeting it is, rather than go by the date. You know, there were about 40+ meetings of your committee before, and
Sure, I can have that
same
easily.
number
Absolutely.
before. So that's the major thing. When I was secretary for the Charter Review Committee, I listed all the members at the top. And then after that, I mentioned below those who were present, as well as those such as Tom Mullen and Bob Vincent, who were not official members of the committee as such.
so that what you're describing is a formatting issue,
Yeah.
not a requirement. These minutes appear to contain all of the legally required items, which would be the date, location, members present or members absent, and then a substantial discussion of all votes taken and whether they're taken by roll call. That's my understanding of the minutes requirements.
Yeah, I knew every
So,
possibly at the very
so
first.
for, formatting will depend largely on the clerk and how they're presented for a given item. I don't think that requires a particularly substantive change. Formatting can be changed by the town clerk as well as she wishes. So we've got a request to put the meeting number at the top of these minutes, any objections? None seen, so we can adopt that. Other amendments, other feedback? Motion to approve the minutes. With that, we'll again go by roll call. So Alex, say more.
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes,
Joe,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Lucy,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So minutes are now approved. With the one change of adding the meeting number, we'll then send these off to
Sherry?
Sherry, and she'll go ahead and post them to the website as
Sounds
well.
great.
So, and then just put a copy of it into the Dropbox, or just edit that document, and that will be there. Periodically, we'll send a copy of these to the town clerk as well.
Perfect.
So she gets to be the record holder for pretty much everything. And Betsy likes to hold on to lots of things when it comes to minutes and hours. Okay, so discussion of the document repository. Did anyone have any questions about the Dropbox repository itself?
the file names are too long. when I'm using,
File names are what they are. They're designed by date, so just to keep it really short. That's a fairly standard naming convention.
what I saw, and I probably do not understand it, the Dropbox is a single unit somehow maintained, and we all have access to it. When I go to there and I see the files, I see bylaw review committee, and then it starts during the day, and then it's truncated.
That may be the browser that you're working on if you're looking at it through a browser.
That means, what else can I do?
You can access Dropbox through almost any platform. So you can access it on Windows, you can access it on Mac, you can access it on tablets, you can access it via smart devices, via web browser, pretty much all web browsers are supported. So it's very easy to access things. There's three dots, there's a menu option that allows you to get more information about any individual file. So as there's more files, I think you'll find it to be more direct of use. But the description, the metadata of the meeting, of the information becomes important because there will likely end up being a fair number of files in here for different minutes and so forth. The minutes are in a folder already for minutes, and then other things will be foldered as appropriate. But it sounds like everyone was able to access the area. If for some reason you aren't able to access it, let me know. If the town comes up with another tool, which is possible, the town is in the process of migrating the mail system, from a legacy system to Microsoft 365. At that point, if they request that we use OneDrive or SharePoint, a different repository, we can migrate things there. We'll let you know as soon as I get information and as a request. Let you know. In the meantime, we've been requested to come up with our own solution. This is one, it's through my professional companies where the license is coming from. So it's not a problem to actually have it in this use. This is a licensed use case. So I'm glad that everyone was able to get to it and appreciate that. Okay, so we actually have the minutes themselves. Those have been approved. And that brings us to chapter 1 of the general provisions. So if you have access to a device that has internet access, I will have.
Do we know what the login? I forget what the login for here is.
There is actually.
On E, yeah, what is that, E? E code search? Is that what we're going under? What do you use, different thing?
I'm not showing a network login that I have access
Right,
to.
that's it. I can ask Steve, so we can have it for next time.
That would be helpful.
I wanted the code to get it.
Okay, I will have access and then I will join the meeting and share this so that people can see the actual text itself. Beauty of cell phones.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah. So with that, we have access to the bylaws within the website where we keep the bylaws. The actual bylaws themselves are kept by Tom. Well, actually, the town clerk. Town clerk, but you probably have a better copy.
I have a copy.
You've got a copy. The good old fashioned books, I believe.
Yep.
Were there with green covers, if I recall correctly?
No, kind of red,
Right, okay.
blood red.
I'm not sure how I should take that. Okay, so in addition to the various files that are in Dropbox, one of them is a spreadsheet that is available for anyone to look at any time. It just shows the progress that we're making as we go through the bylaws. It's just a list of the bylaws. And it shows the last date of adoption that I could find for each bylaw. And that way, in some cases, they're broken down to sections so that we know what we've reviewed, and then a quick summary of if there's a change, what should take place on that. So for today, just to kind of get us started into the review of bylaws, figured we'd start with just chapter 1, which is a relatively short chapter. It's got 2 articles, which is not uncommon. And it goes on to the next chapter itself. And we'll go through this. If anyone as you're preparing for me, if you go through things and you take notes and you say, wait, I'm not sure about it, that can become very helpful. Otherwise, the idea is that we'll go through the actual bylaws themselves to make corrections. We did this in the last bylaw review committee meeting down to the point of trying to figure out what words needed to be changed. And that became very important because there were a lot of words that were outdated. Now, not all of the updates were made. In some cases, very intentional. In some cases, they got rejected by the state. So we just have to be careful as to what we do. Fortunately, Tom is here with us to guide us with sage advice, and then we will go from there. So within Article 1, the interpretations and penalties, we start with Chapter 1, Section 1, the title. I'm not going to read the actual text of all of these out loud. And you'll note when they're adopted and if there's any changes, they're typically put in by the editor. The editor is actually the company called eCode. They manage the actual presentation on the website. It seems to be accurate. In the event of a conflict between what's here and what's in the books downstairs, I'll let Tom figure out which one he has to defend. So he'll make that component. So first thing we have is actually the title of this, which is bylaws, may be referred to as the general bylaws of the town of Wakefield. You will notice that the word bylaw sometimes has a dash, sometimes doesn't. It's inconsistent in that way and has not seemed to present a problem so far. So if you notice it sometimes listed with a dash, sometimes not, that's pretty consistent. Things that I do recommend that we look for is things such as gender usage within bylaws. I know that a lot of those were changed and corrected, but things have changed even in the last 5 years. So we may want to consider revising language and so forth, just to make sure that we're being appropriately inclusive, consistent with the wording that has been provided by the Human Rights Commission and adopted by the town council and school committee on behalf of the town itself. Any changes that we make ultimately have to be approved by town meeting. So we then have the construal of provisions. We get into some really funky, I think that's a proper word, funky legal language, legalese. We've got a few lawyers in the room that are probably much more comfortable with reading the wherefores and so forth than the rest of us are. But part of what I found fascinating is to try and understand what these actually mean. You'll notice that the record of bylaws was updated. This is one of the ones that was updated. In this case, it doesn't state exactly.
It was updated to add the last sentence, to require that the bylaws be available online.
Yeah,
That's why we did that one.
that is correct. And it is now available online. And according to this bylaw, it's supposed to be a true copy. Again, if there is a discrepancy, we leave it up to Tom to figure that one out. Fortunately, he's really good at figuring out discrepancies.
I was at the library a couple of days ago and their printed copy is obsolete. They still have changes that took place with the Charter Commission, not yet in that thick folder by the reference desk. But they showed me how to use E-code, and that's a great help.
Right.
But worth taking note, contact the library so that they can get either an updated copy of the bylaws or at least put a notation on theirs that it is
Yep.
notably out of date. I've taken a note, I can take on that action item. Any discussion on sections 1, 2, or 3? Title, construal provisions, record of bylaws. And Tom, if there's anything here that you think needs to be updated as you go through this, please, by all means, you're welcome to contribute.
So Dan, just
Yep.
underscore, we thought going through it slowly, because we're gonna get into the meat and bones very, quickly. It's gonna be much more controversial and much more. But just to show the process that went through last time, really going through word by word. And even, bylaw with a dash, if we see that, we should get rid of it. We can make those kind of changes. So we're starting out slow, which I think makes sense, since.
With 191 available chapters, yes.
Yes.
Are we allowed to go back? Like, once we go past this, right, we can always go back and.
Absolutely.
Always.
Something.
Yep.
So, but,
And I can't even remember how many times we went back and re-revised things.
Okay.
It's very, very common.
Because won't realize it now, but 3 chapters.
further
from
on,
now,
yeah, then
be
you'll-
like, you know what, that doesn't,
Yeah.
work together, so, yeah.
So I actually, just as we're going through this, so section 1.4. Licenses and permits. When in a bylaw, anything is prohibited from being done without the license or permission of a certain officer, officers, or board, such officer, officers, or board shall have power to license or permit such thing to be done. I propose that we add the word council. Since town council is now referred to as a council. While it is technically a board, would be covered by that.
If you're going to speak generically, can I recommend you just use the term that the open meeting law does, which is public body?
Okay.
Because if we're going to say council, we might as well add commission, Why get that wordy? Public
Okay.
body covers everything.
So change the word board to public body, would that be a recommendation?
I'd say of a certain officer or public body. I don't know why we have officers
Officers.
plural in here.
Yeah, we don't need that.
If that plural, let our body, yeah.
So you would scratch out officers or board, comma, such officer, comma, officers or board. You'd scratch all that out and just replace that with
Yeah.
public body.
Permission of a certain officer or public body.
Yeah.
Such officer or public body shall have. Yeah.
Makes sense?
Other thoughts? We'll take the actual vote on changes when we get the language for the actual change itself. So at this point, the purpose of the discussions is to make recommendations so that Tom can then come back with those changes into what will ultimately turn into a warrant article. And we'll take a vote to further the warrant article. That's it, just so everyone understands the process. Where there's discussion, we can, if there is disagreement or apparent disagreement amongst anyone in the board itself, then we will go ahead and have that discussion. We can take interim votes as well. But in general, votes of significance happen when we actually see the final language. Does it make sense to make, it seems that 1.4 is a double negative, when it's prohibited from being done without. Would it be clearer if it's made an affirmative? Or anything requires?
I don't think so.
Okay. I try not to be too negative. Okay, moving along, section 1, chapter 1, section 5, word usage.
Okay, here I've got one big concern. It's the first one, A. The words public way shall include any highway, townway, road, bridge, street, avenue, boulevard, roadway, parkway, land, sidewalk, or square taken or owned by the town or dedicated to public use in accordance with law or to which the public has a right of access. Where do I begin? This is awful. I don't know how I missed it the last time. There are two kinds of streets in the world. There are public ways and private ways. Basically, a private way is, think your driveway. That's a private way. But also a road that's been approved by the planning board under subdivision control, but not yet accepted as a public way. It's owned by either the developer or the abutters. Also, there are undeveloped paper streets dating back to the, who knows, 1600s. Our town is honeycombed with these things. So that's one concept, private way. Then there are public ways, which we want to be really careful if we use that term, because we, the town, are responsible for the public ways. We have to maintain them. If someone gets injured or they damage their property because of a defect in the public way, the town is responsible. And there are only certain ways that a way can become public. This definition doesn't state those ways properly. There are three ways. One is prior to 1846, you could dedicate it if you were the private owner, meaning you just say, this street is going to be used for the public benefit in the future. And so this mentions dedication. The second is the way that we do it now, which is through a statutory process where the town council lays out a public way after the planning board has approved it, and then town meeting approves it, and we record an order of taking. And then there's a third way, which isn't mentioned here at all, and that's where the town acquires an easement by prescription, where the public has actually been using a private way as if it were public for 20 years or more. Why on God's green earth would we want to get into that level of legal detail in our bylaws? Totally unnecessary. It's a mess. And this misstates the law in material ways, because this says that a public way includes a bridge. Well, no, it doesn't. A bridge can go over, a public way can go over a bridge, but that doesn't mean the bridge is a public way. It includes land. Well, yes, there's land in a public way, but if the town takes, this says that literally any land taken or owned by the town is a public way. No, that's wrong. And finally, it says any way to which the public has a right of access. No, wrong again. Let me give you an example. I live on Jordan Terrace, which was a subdivision that was created in the 80s, and then it was accepted as a public way in this century. So in the 80s, when it was created by the planning board, it was a private way, okay? But when the planning board approved it, that meant that it was open to the public for use. Private way, but open to the public. And this would say that that way was a public way right from the start, as soon as the planning board approved it. That's just legally wrong, and we don't want to create any confusion. We don't want to give some creative lawyer an excuse to claim that the town is responsible for those kinds of private ways. I considered rewriting this and then I gave up. It's junk. Let's delete it. We don't need it because the term public way is well defined in the law anyway.
In the statute, you mean talking about from the Massachusetts law?
Well, statute and case law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the recommendation is to strike section A, relabel everything else
Yeah,
appropriately.
I would.
Discussion, thoughts?
Well, contrary, what you have is public way, private way, and other. So you could describe all three and not describe other at all. It's, so you have all kinds of ways and you just describe the public way, which as you say is a problem.
Well,
I'm just suggesting that.
I disagree. There's public way and private way. The universe is divided into those two halves. There's no other. Anything other would still be a kind of private way. My driveway is a private way.
Okay, but your house is not.
Well, the house isn't a way at all.
Right, okay, because you can't travel over it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I don't think we should define anything that is already defined in Massachusetts law, in case law. There's no reason to.
Do you scratch it or you just should we just mention that there are public ways and private ways? Or you just want to get it out of there all?
No reason to deal
think
with it at
scratch it.
all. It's defined adequately. Not only is it well defined in mass law, but we don't want to try to second that definition because we might get it wrong.
Yeah.
Could you say that Wakefield is divided up between public way and private ways, or did you just? I mean, it's in there. I don't know. I just feel like it's in there why is it even in there in the first place then?
Well, that's a good question. It shouldn't be here.
Shouldn't be.
Yeah. Because we do sometimes have occasion to use the term public way in the bylaws, but when we do, we should be referencing a true public way, something that meets the statutory definition.
And this is just to be clear, this is just the definition section, not the implementation of what those mean. So this section is where we're defining things to further, there will then be referenced later on. So if we don't define it, then it's going to revert to some other form of definition. Lucy, I know you have feedback to contribute.
Yeah, I just was gonna ask, you all kind of touched on it already, but I was just gonna ask whether we knew when it was added and if it was to address a specific need.
Yeah.
So I think, Lucy, I don't know that, and it looks like Tom doesn't either, but I also think we don't need to give blind deference to what is in the bylaws based on how they were written in the past and who might have been at the table. So all very well intentioned, but maybe not accurate in some of what was added. Is that a fair statement?
I think it's a fair statement. In fact, I think the core reason why we are
Had a
created,
commission.
why we're created as a committee of the town meeting to independently reassess the bylaws every 5 years.
Exactly.
You think it was created at one point because there was a problem with it not being in there?
Not gonna speculate.
No, yeah, you can't.
I would say.
So you wouldn't, by any chance, someone would say, so what would Wakefield, the town of Wakefield define as a public way?
I would say how Massachusetts defines it.
So we would just refer them to, or refer anybody to what mass law would state?
Yeah, it's a legal question. And so if we refer, for example, to the owner of property, well, we shouldn't be defining who's the owner. 'Cause in fact, we don't have the authority to. We can't change property law.
Oh, everybody knows right to be.
Yeah.
It appears that Article 1 was adopted in 1992, 30 years ago. And since there's no notation in 1-4 that there was ever an amendment, that's probably the one and only time that was put in there was when they were first put in 92.
See, 92 though was a recodification.
Yeah.
So this probably was inherited from old general bylaws that could date back who knows?
Yeah, going back to the 1800s or something.
So other thoughts, other discussion on potentially getting rid of section A? Which brings us to the next thing you just mentioned, which was owner, section B. Is there a reason to define, to have a town-based of a definition of the owner?
I actually think there is. I think this serves a purpose because this says the owner or occupant of a building or land shall include any sole owner or occupant and any joint tenant and tenant in common of the whole or of any part of a building or lot of land. What I take that to mean is one way that you can own a piece of property is all by yourself. And in that case, obviously you are the owner. But another way is you can be a joint tenant or a tenant in common. It basically means that you and one or more other people have some kind of joint rights to that property. I see this definition as saying, if we refer to the owner and the land in question is owned jointly, everybody in that joint ownership is an owner. And that could be a useful thing to mean, because otherwise, it might be that, say, land is held jointly, and if we are prosecuting only one joint owner for a violation, he may say, hey, you've got to name absolutely everybody. And this gives us the opportunity to say, oh no, our bylaw says that everybody who has a hand in the ownership is an owner or occupant.
Would it require that we then contact everybody? I'm thinking about the buildings, the development that was just approved at the head of the lake, 400 some units. Would that require that we then, if there is an issue that need to be prosecuted, would we have to, if that is actually owned by, because it would be occupied presumably by 400 some families, would we have to?
But those are renters.
Or does it give us the flexibility to do either?
Well, in a case where we're doing something with respect to the owner, there would presumably just be one corporate owner.
Okay. Because I think of and I'm sure we've all seen, there has been a large growth in multifamily housing in the town. And in which case, it would probably allow us to effectively take actions on 2-family, 3-family properties if a family is doing something that causes a problem. So the one that immediately comes to mind, just as an example, would be if there's a need for snow removal consistent with because there's a business in the building. So with the business, this snow removal bylaw requires that snow be removed. But if there's a violation of that, the collection of the fines for that could go after the respective owners of the building, is the way that I would read this. Would that be a
Yeah,
preference?
and it's not just negative too. It also works in favor of property owners. You know, if there's some kind of right that attaches to ownership, we're saying everybody who has a hand in this ownership enjoys that right.
Do we need to add like a bank, if it's bank owned or anything, or is that?
No,
No?
because in that case, the owner is the bank.
Is this written differently than the state of Massachusetts would look at the word usage?
No, 'cause this is kind of agnostic about how you own property. It contemplates that there might be sole ownership, joint tenancy, tenancy in common, or otherwise.
I'm wondering if we're deferring on A to the state, how many of these, if we're gonna do that with A, could we do it with more of them?
No, I think the state law would just, you would look at it to determine whether there's one person who has a stake in the property or more than one. And this says if there's more than one, then when we say owner, we mean all of them, and we mean each of them.
Okay.
Good questions and comments. Anything else on owner? Anyone else want to own any piece of this? Okay. Words purporting to give a joint authority to 3 or more officers shall give it to a majority of such officers or persons.
What does that mean?
Does that actually apply to anything? I'm trying to figure out.
It's members of a single committee or board or something, a single entity.
I'm trying to think if there's an example of a word that would purport to give a
Right.
joint authority.
Yeah, and, you know, it hadn't occurred to me, but maybe we ought to strike this because I can't think of any example where it's helpful. And also, this may misstate the law if it says, for example, where there's joint authority for 3 or more persons, then the authority goes to a majority. What if you're dealing with a board that has to act by a supermajority?
Right.
And I'm thinking the zoning board of
The
appeals.
ZBA sometimes usually has to act by 4/5.
I don't know that it's necessary.
No, I agree.
Recommendation to strike. Any thoughts, people online? Lucy, Catherine, Alex? D is one that I looked at and said, this one actually has renewed interest because of the present political climate. The word person may include corporations. I don't have a problem with the way that it's worded. I'm just trying to figure out if it's needed, and 2, if we want to more clearly define the word person.
I don't like the word may include what's may. Either it does or it doesn't. What's like the word may include a corporation. So it sometimes does or it sometimes doesn't.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's throughout different sections coming up too.
So that word may shouldn't even be in there. Either it is or it isn't. No.
I think it's probably
So statutorily based, so different laws will allow corporations to be considered as persons, not all laws will. So I wonder if that's, Bob, is that,
I don't know.
I'm deferring to the other lawyer down the end of the.
Tom, any thoughts on this one?
Maybe what we want to get across is that the word person means both natural persons and I don't know that we want to limit it to corporations because there are other business entities.
Yeah.
Natural persons and business entities, unless the context requires otherwise.
In which case, does it need to be defined? Do you want to take that one back and
Let me,
ponder
want
it?
me to work on that?
I'm just, that one seems like it could be fraught with issues, given the many different ways that entities are created.
Why wouldn't we just use the word entity or some other non-person word for a corporation?
Depends, all I can think of is it depends upon what the bylaw is getting at. In some cases, a corporation acts as a person. Again, the one that comes to mind is snow removal. It is, I think that it refers to the owner, but the owner may be a corporation. But it may also be an LLC, it may be a partnership. There's lots of different ways you can get to different legal structures, some of which certainly had not been contemplated when this was written. but I also don't know that it needs to be defined here either, and that's part of what I'm wondering.
Well,
Yeah,
I guess,
like
I'm sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
if there's an opportunity to define it in the more, like in the more specific case, that it's talking about actual implementation rather than just broadly at the beginning to be applied in all cases.
I think what Lucy's getting at is this really just directory information? Is as a statement of values as opposed to anything that has legal effect, because of the word may. It may just be directory, as Tom has educated me over the years. Directory is a directive, it's not really enforceable on itself, as opposed to something that's mandatory. Did I summarize that well?
Yep.
So,
But definitions have a strong legal, definition section can then be applied to the rest of the bylaw. So it is important that we, get it right or take it out, expand it.
Yeah, I'm thinking, basically, I want to defeat the attempt by scuzzy lawyers to escape responsibility for their clients. So if a bylaw says that any person who owns property shall do A, B, and C, I don't want him even to be able to muck things up in a district court session by saying, oh, well,
Another person.
there's no person here who owns this property. It's an LLC. So, Your Honor, you've got to dismiss this complaint.
Well, wouldn't you sue the corporation? You really, if once you're a corporation, you're not allowed to be sued, right? You're suing the corporation, you're not suing the person.
No, I'm saying that if we have a right to sue the owner, the person who is the owner, we don't want that owner to escape liability by saying, oh, I'm not a natural person, I'm an artificial person. And the word person really ought to apply to any kind of entity, legal or natural.
I feel like we're gonna be going back to this as we go forward and maybe see it in further chapters and then say, oh, maybe that's what they were talking about by person.
Well, this whole section it's called word usage. So this is where we're getting the foundation of the who going forward, the who, the what.
Do you want to play with that definition, Tom? Is
Yeah,
that something?
sure.
All right.
So Tom will come back with some recommendations on that. Okay, I think we've got next one, it's hopefully an easier one. Words importing the singular number may apply to the plural number. Singulars can be plurals, plurals can be singulars.
Do we want to say and vice versa?
Doesn't hurt, probably.
I don't see any harm in basically saying numbers may be singular, may be plural, it's whatever it happens to be. Thoughts? Otherwise, putting it so that it can go either way, I think makes sense. F is one that just reading it may want to make a change. Words importing the masculine gender may apply to the feminine gender. What comes to mind is something that makes it so that it doesn't require it to be a binary gender. Just words importing a gender may apply to any gender, something along those lines. Since there are now, at least in Massachusetts, we have 3 legally recognized genders by the RMV at least.
Agreed. I was going to make the same recommendation.
Thoughts?
So how would you word that?
You're getting rid of masculine and feminine, just saying
Words importing
any gender.
words importing any gender. Words importing a single gender may apply to any gender.
To all genders.
Yeah, that's clean.
That's nice, like all genders.
For any gender. I'm not sure what should be any or all. Other thoughts, discussion on that?
It's fine.
G, which is a new one. This is one that we added last time. Wherever in these bylaws, written notice is required unless some specific form thereof is called for, such as certified mail or hand delivery. Electronic notice will suffice if acknowledged by the recipient. Basically, this allows for email or equivalent as long as they acknowledge it. Does require the acknowledgement, so just having it sent is not enough. Because as we all know, things can go into junk mail. But if someone says, yes, I'm willing to accept it, they will accept delivery. Seems to be, at least from a legal perspective, very, very common these days.
It has the crisp sound of a Dan Lieber definition.
Oh, I believe that was Bob Vincent.
It was Bob Vincent? All right.
I know we did it back then.
Just as good.
It's been too many years now.
So a business day shall mean a day when the town hall or facility used for substantially the same purpose is open for normal town business. Do we need to define what normal town business is, or, and the only reason why I think about that is some weeks they do open the building, or at least parts of the building on Saturdays. Sundays, the building is technically open for something 7 days a week. Or do we tie it to something else?
See, I think that's a good reason why we don't say is a day when the town hall is open.
Right.
But if you say it's open for normal town business, I don't know, what would you say instead?
I'm thinking is open for normal town business as defined by the town council. I would just want there to be a definition, or when is open for normal town business and the town clerk's office is open. I'd tie it to something specific, because normal town business would include the DPW.
We should just say Monday through Wednesday, Monday through
And
Friday.
they're open 7 days a week.
This is,
Yeah, I was about to suggest town clerk. The town clerk is open, it's a business day.
And this is important because we have
A lot of things on business day.
a lot of things tied with the timing of business days and when notices can be delivered, when people need to file. So I do think it's important that it's not just a free, it's not like it's not 7 days.
Right.
So why aren't we just defining it Monday through Friday? Isn't that a business day? And take out Saturday and Sunday, so I mean, that's,
You got questions of holidays, that came up on the charter review.
It's holidays, and I think it's also like snow days.
Right.
What if there's an emergency and town hall isn't open?
you're trying to tie it into town hall.
Yeah.
But you don't want to tie it into a town hall day that, like a Saturday, like you're saying.
But, and that's what I'm thinking, town clerk's office is open for something along the lines. The town clerk's office seems like it, because that's where most filings would take place.
Yeah.
Is scheduled and open for normal town business. Because I'm thinking about, I know that the town clerk's is open on Saturdays prior to voting. So that's where just.
That's not normal town business stuff,
That's
right?
why I like this definition.
Yeah.
You know, whatever is normal town business, meaning all the counters downstairs are open.
Yeah, not
Not
all.
just town clerk, which might be open, as you say, on a Saturday and
Right.
certain times of the year.
Do we need the clause or facility used for substantially the same purpose?
I guess the idea there is, what if there was a casualty here at town hall and we opened an emergency,
Got
building
it,
elsewhere?
got it. Okay, it's open from the, yeah, I think it can stay like this.
Yeah.
If you think that this is defensible, and that we're not going to have someone say, well, because the normal town business itself isn't defined, that they're gonna say, well, normal town business would include DPW. Or would include the fact that they're, around an election. That's where,
No,
I just
I
don't.
don't think it's a problem.
Okay.
If all that's going on in the town hall is DPW, That's not normal town business because of all the other offices that aren't open.
I think that's defensible. Bob
We'll be defending it.
and Tom.
Bob, what do you think?
I'm looking to see, is
Because we
is this defined in the charter as well? I don't remember that off the top of my head. I'm trying to look at that right now.
No, but the charter has a bunch of sections that talk about,
counting town days.
Yeah, well, in the charter, yeah, you're right, 7.3D, computation of time.
Yeah.
Unless otherwise provided in computing time under this charter, if 7 days or less, only business days, not including Saturdays, Sundays, or legal holidays shall be counted. If more than 7 days, every day shall be counted. And that was amended by the charter review back in 2018.
Yeah. I remember.
So should we reference the charter in that section of the bylaws?
The charter was concerned with the time to gather signatures. And they boosted up the number of signatures needed and cut down the amount of time.
It doesn't sound like that's actually a definition, though, of business day.
No,
That's just that's a counting of it.
that's just the counting of it.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm looking at the definition section of the charter and it's not listed in the definition section.
So I think this can stay.
Yep.
I think this works. This makes sense.
Thoughts? Those online? Additional thoughts? This is one we may want to come back to later on. Since there is definition, perhaps that this should reference the charter definition or not.
But there isn't one.
There's not a definition in the charter.
Okay.
It's not listed in that section.
It's just accounting.
The charter also has very convoluted gender language in it too. Much worse. You guys have done a nice job clarifying the gender with your changes here. The charter one is very convoluted.
That was not on the table during the.
And I just looked at that. That's very
That was a part
confusing.
of this.
Okay. Almost done with this. So with that, we're not seeing a change recommended for the term of business day, at least not at this time. Okay, violations and penalties. This was updated again in 2018 to change the actual amounts of fines by default. This is unless otherwise specified. This basically says if you have an issue and you do the same thing multiple times, the first time it's gonna be $100, second time within a year, it's gonna be $200, third time and subsequent, it's gonna be 300. I don't think state laws allowed us to charge more than that.
Yeah, we can't go over 300. And for what it's worth, this is really pretty typical
Yeah.
language.
The way that it's written, that and part of each day or portion thereof that any violation continue shall constitute a separate offense. Does that mean day 1 is 100 and day 2 is 200? Like, would it be if it was consecutive like that?
Yes.
Okay.
So someone who is violating something for, say, a week would have, at that point, $1,800, 5 at 300, 1 at 200, 1 at 100 in potential fines. At that point, it might be worth for non-criminal disposition to take effect, because I know that requires the town to potentially go to district court and all sorts of other things.
Is this for a detected offense? The first detected offense, the second observed offense, the third observed offense, and so on? In other words, you gotta keep going after the law offender and catch them every day, so you can keep piling up offenses. Or is it you found the first offense in one day and then you went back a few days later and found he's still offending, so that's his second offense, not his third, fourth, or fifth day. Am I inventing something?
Well, I'm looking, if it's a continuous violation,
Yeah,
or would be inferred as a continuous violation, that would probably be a matter for a court to decide at that point. What, if someone were to challenge it.
We want to make sure that
We have,
nobody takes advantage of the fact that it's a continuous violation to say, oh, this is all just one big violation.
Right.
So you're limited to finding the $100.
So an example of that would be if someone were to dispose of snow in an area that they're not supposed to, snow and ice, because it's conservation land or something like that, where a violation the first day would be $100. They do it again. They don't want to say, well, it's one season. And so the whole season is $100, and they may look at it and say, well, the $100 isn't worth it. It's not worth me changing my behaviors, as opposed to every day or a portion of it changes. So the storm that starts at 10 PM and it's done before midnight, and then they do it again the next day. Now you've got 2 violations.
You have picked an example in which the offense can disappear because they do the violation of dumping, and you go back the second day and it's still there, and you go back the third day and it's all melted, so there's no more offenses after that, so there are just 2 offenses noted.
So be it.
yep,
That's fine.
that's okay,
Yep.
that's okay.
And I think this is more of the, if we need the hammer.
The town needs the hammer to use. The town does not use this willy-nilly nor casually.
But I think it is important for folks if potentially take advantage.
And what comes to mind is the bylaw on abandoned autos, which is where you could potentially get the fines adding up very quickly. And that has been an issue for the town. So that's just an example of where I could see this being used. Not that the town necessarily wants to enforce it, but they want to be able to have it.
Yeah.
I think it's important.
Collecting fines is a huge hassle.
Yeah.
It's generally not worth it. So we don't do it as a matter of course.
Right.
But you got to have it there as a threat.
Yeah, I think that was part of my question also, is this provides the ability to, it doesn't mandate that it will be done that way.
That's right.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
This brings us to non-criminal disposition. This is something that we're going to see a lot of, because non-criminal disposition is also defined in many of the individual bylaws. Overall, this is just kind of the general overall statement. And do we have the right term of health agent? I know that the terminology has changed for the person responsible for health.
I believe, yeah.
I think health agent is now correct.
Yep.
Was health director.
The health department sent a letter to the charter commission saying, on their literature, referring to the members and the health director. The letter was signed by the director, and they said they wanted to appoint it as the health director. This got moved, this was a new section C, and it was not adopted, submitted to town meeting. And so the existing language of the appointment of the health agent is still present in the charter. So it may be that everyone uses the word, in the department uses the word health director, and the bylaws, the charter uses health agent.
Just on their website to see if they do it.
Do you know the?
Health director. He's noted as health director on our website.
Okay.
I think health agent is,
It's obsolete.
health agent is some of the folks that work for the health department, but health director? Where's the?
Council, we task you with figuring out what the correct term
Sure.
of that, because it does allow for designee as well.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that where I know that we've changed that terminology
If it's
in there to make it, where this is the definition section.
Yeah, sounds good.
So other thoughts on 1717?
Yeah, my concern about 1.7 is in C, any alleged violation of the selectmen's regulation. I thought we caught all this.
Yeah. We had done, we had voted, anytime it appeared in there as select, change it to town
This
council.
may actually be an editor's error.
Yeah, that's what I think, editor, because there's a couple of those.
If you can find a wet noodle to go after the editor. So B is relating to the discarding of components and allows for the police to basically give fines, is my understanding.
Sorry, where are you?
In B?
B, yep.
So when there's a fine, because the fines can actually be assigned by both the police and by the DPW, the police can choose to make it non-criminal. Now, we haven't gotten to that area, but that 175, 8 and 9 was a change that was made so that the DPW actually has ticketing authority, provided that they have the appropriate training and so forth. Now, is there any issue with the fact that in C it talks specifically about dogs and does not talk about other things like coyotes and cats and other things we now know live in the town? Just having fun here.
I was gonna say, oh my gosh, I'm not picking up the coyote word.
I get rabbit poop in my head.
I scooped
Or
it up with
geese.
my,
Well, we've got geese, we've got fowl.
Turkeys too, hanging running around.
I think that looks good.
Okay, 1.8, refusal to comply with order.
One quick question, Dan.
Sure.
Just going back to B,
Yep,
it says any alleged violation of 175.1 of the code of the town of Wakefield. Should it be the word code or should it be bylaw? Since 175.1's a bylaw. Or does it matter? I didn't catch that when we did this before.
and it says it later in that where it says said code.
I mean, you could always add in the definitions.
If code is interspersed throughout, you can
Yeah.
put in the definitions that.
I don't know how often code appears. I can't remember. It might be a lot.
Applies to the bylaws.
Yeah, I think we use the term code for both zoning and general bylaws.
Yeah, it's been so many years, I can't remember, but for some reason we kept it in there.
Should that be defined in the definitions? Would be helpful from a legal perspective.
Article 2 of the section defines code, mentions code of the town of Wakefield, if you scroll down. So I think that gets to maybe what you're talking about. Article 2.
Oh, I see, in such codification of bylaws to be known as the code of the town of Wakefield.
There we go.
So-
Thank you.
Oh, good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But maybe, so we put that, should we put it in the definition section or is it?
Fine there.
I think it's
Fine.
great right where it is.
Okay.
Cheating, you read ahead.
Control 5.
Okay. So that brings us back to C. So we've got Tom, are you able to contact the editor? Do you know who's responsible for that?
No.
Okay, I will contact town administrator and let him figure out who's responsible for that. Because I'm pretty sure that should have been covered by the article that.
That's right. So this is not a change that we would make because
Right.
we've already made it.
Yeah.
One seven C. Okay. People who refuse to comply with orders and they're served in writing, which as we've noted, could be by email as long as they acknowledge it, we can find them. $100 for the first, $200 for the second, $300 for each additional day. Don't refuse to do what you're ordered to do. That's
Kind of like the hammer we talked about before.
1.9, the time limit for prosecution. Is 6 months sufficient for prosecution? And what I'm thinking about is things such as the motor vehicles and so forth. 6 months seems like it's a really short timeline.
Shall be commenced within 6 months, not completed? So,
But it means you have 6 months to actually start the prosecution itself. Which could be really short in the event of we're doing a cleanup of a site and it takes more than 6 months.
Well, I would think that if you're talking about a continuing violation like that, the 6 months doesn't begin until the violation ends. Right? So long as the violation's ongoing, you can begin your prosecution.
so not at the beginning. It doesn't
Doesn't have to be at the beginning of the breach. It's
Yeah.
during any time of the breach.
Which still gets to 6 months sufficient. It basically becomes a statute of limitations. Thoughts?
Would it make sense to have it for a year since everything else is within a year time frame? You know what I'm saying? Like you have a first offense, second offense, third offense within that year. Would it make sense to have that change from 6 months to a year since we're already in a 1 year time frame anyways?
I guess.
Is that too long?
Get to how difficult is this going to be to sell to town meeting? Because you've always got a bunch of libertarians at town meeting who are going to say, wait a minute. You mean that you're going to catch me dumping snow where I shouldn't dump it? And you have up to a year to actually prosecute me.
So we're gonna have to defend this, and
Okay.
I already can name the 4 people that will come up and stand and argue against it. That might not be worth our blood, sweat and tears. I don't know.
So let's just keep it at the 6 months.
No, I see your point. but
It's a
I can
great
tell you,
point.
This has never been a problem.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Other thoughts? Two more mini sections, then we're done with this. So disposition of fines and penalties. This gets to one of those legalese terms of inure. It's not a word that the non-lawyers in this room use on any sort of regular basis. I'm not sure it's one that the lawyers use on a regular basis.
Lawyers shouldn't use it on a regular basis either, frankly.
Tom, based on what you suggested half hour ago about board being replaced by public body.
Yeah.
Should that be replaced there too?
That's a good point. Yes.
And for that matter, the same thing with 1.8 in that first sentence. Whoever shall refuse and neglect to obey any lawful order of any town official or board of town officials.
Oh,
Yeah.
Maybe in 1.8 and 1.10,
Yeah.
you might want to change it like you suggested for
Town officer
Public
or
body.
public body.
Thank you, Bob. Other thoughts? Note, the money here goes to the town treasury, does not go to the town council, regardless of how you spell it. You may prosecute, you just can't get anything for it. Okay, 111. Any or all of these bylaws may be repealed or amended at any town meeting. The only thing here that's I find interesting is the word or all of these bylaws. because that suggests that there could be someone that could actually repeal the entire code, including zoning.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great point.
They could.
But can we just say any? We have to say all?
I actually don't know why this is even in here.
Because that's all defined by state law?
Yeah. I mean, you can't do it otherwise than at a town meeting, and there are only two kinds of town meetings, annual and special.
Okay.
So this doesn't add anything to the mix.
So should we just recommend that we repeal the part on how to repeal?
I'd actually be tempted to leave it alone because it's not doing any damage. And I think about
Oh, yeah.
defending this at town meeting. Somebody's gonna say, you mean to say that we can't amend bylaws in the future? No.
That's an excellent point, Tom.
It remains as tutorial about state law. This section is really,
Yeah,
you reckon this is being tutorial in nature?
yeah.
So no harm, no foul, just leave it alone.
I'd either leave it alone or just axe it because it's surplus, but a fair amount of this is surplus.
Thoughts? Otherwise, for now, I'm thinking there's no real harm in leaving it as is. If someone were to try to say, get rid of zoning, chapter 190, other than us, which we're not going to anyways, I'm sure. But if someone were to try to remove that, they would still have to get it passed by the requisite number of people at a town meeting, whether it be special or annual. And that would, for all practical purposes, be very difficult. I don't see this as actually introducing harm, is my reading of it.
Okay.
And with that, last section is Article 2. Just talks about what happened in 1997 and defines it as the Code of Wakefield. Questions, thoughts?
This is completely the writer in me. If we want to be consistent with like capitalization, I know it's ridiculous, but like bylaws isn't always capitalized. We don't have, my recollection is there's an amendment that we can do to just clean up those kind of errors.
Yeah, we had a kind of omnibus
We had an omnibus last time.
article, yeah.
We've done a few of them. We did one for the change of selectmen to town council. We also did.
Small editing like that.
Yeah.
Just to be consistent, and not that it's neither here nor there, but why not clean it up if we have it?
This is for the word town, had it be capitalized.
Yeah,
Whenever we know which town it is referred to, like it's always this town.
Yep.
Okay. With that, congratulations, we've now completed chapter 1 of the bylaws for Wakefield, our first pass. And with that, we've actually come up with a fair number of changes. We've got quite a bit of work that Tom's going to have to do and come back to us with. I've got a couple of action items to contact people as well. So with that, really well done, good feedback. This is, as a committee, how things will probably work. Just as you've got ideas, you've got thoughts, speak up. There is nothing here that is inappropriate. There is nothing here that I've heard that is wrong. Tom's here to provide his counsel, and we can choose to follow it. We can also choose to disagree with him. And the good news is Tom's amazingly smart and will go with whatever is voted ultimately and, you know, defend it one way or the other. That's what he does. So as we go into additional meetings and we have sections, please, if you can, read them ahead of time, the more, so we don't have to go through quite in this much detail with this. But this is just to kind of give you a flavor of the level of detail that we really are looking at with the bylaws. Because part of this is challenging the assumptions behind why is a bylaw there? What is being done with it? Why is it being handled in a particular way? All really good, important questions. Because if we don't know, it's not necessarily that we have to find out. We can ask the question, is it needed? Is it necessary? In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. In some cases, it's not worth the change. It may not be necessary, but it may not be worth the process because there is a political process to the changes themselves. So with that, our next meeting is scheduled for next month on August 15th at 7 p.m. And at that meeting, we will discuss the meetings in September as well. So last thing, any items that need to get added to future agendas, and then we will adjourn. Eric.
When he ran for town council, Bob Vincent suggested ways to improve the town meeting and knowledge and stuff like that. And I said, I have some ideas and that kind of thing. Can I talk to him?
Of course, you can talk to him. That's certainly allowed.
And can he make suggestions that would find action in the bylaws?
As long as it's less than a quorum of the committee itself, you can have discussions. In many cases, they can be very helpful because you can bounce ideas outside of a meeting. That's not considered official deliberation because of any substance that causes a problem. Where you have to be careful of it is if you then have serial communication afterwards that in total constitutes a quorum of the committee. But as long as it doesn't reach a quorum of the committee, then there is not a legal problem with it. And Bob has many great ideas. He's got a wealth of knowledge as a town councilor. He is our liaison to the full town council. So you are welcome to talk to him. He is not a voting member of this body. He contributes his time graciously and expertise, thank you, Bob, to the committee itself. So if you wish to contact him, you are absolutely welcome to do so.
A lot of people contact me now that I'm on town council.
Yeah, I don't miss that.
Even when I'm jogging in the store, yeah.
And secondarily, if I find someone has made a misstatement during the process here, and I don't want to embarrass them in public, I can talk to that person because it would be a one-to-one conversation that would, by its very nature, would not go from down the whole sequence to everyone else.
That sounds consistent with the open meeting law as well. As long as it's a conversation amongst two members, we're currently 10, I don't see any issues.
Thank you.
I think you guys
So-
are unsung heroes.
Anything else? Any other specific items? Bob, I think you had mentioned that you might propose an item that we might want to take up, I believe, at the August.
Yeah. There's a bylaw but it's zoning. It may be a long time before you get to zoning. It's in 190.
So, but if it's something that should come up beforehand, we certainly can. It may be a good one to get us to look at what zoning can look like and why we will probably almost certainly need to get additional assistance. So professional assistance with Tom's help to figure those pieces out. So that may be a good thing to just kind of get things in before we get into the heart of zoning itself. Because there is money that is appropriate for this fiscal year, now that we're actually into the new fiscal year, that can be used so that we can actually get the appropriate expertise for the zoning recodification that is likely. So if you have details on it that you want to send, we
yeah.
can certainly add it to,
Okay.
to the agenda, start the process. Because for zoning, it can take time to get through the process. If we get it quickly and approve it, then it goes back to town council for referral to the planning board and then inclusion in the warrant. And then the planning board actually has to do public postings, and eventually they have to hold a public hearing before the town meeting so they can make a recommendation for or against for every single zoning article. That's a process. We may end up with a bunch of them to do at once, but to start with it, I think probably will be helpful just so that we can see what that process looks like and the timing for it. So, excellent. With that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion.
I see Lucy nodding. So Lucy, I see Lucy's making a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
I see lots of people seconding the motion to adjourn. So with that, we do need to have this by roll call. So Alex,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Lucy,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So with that, motion to adjourn is approved. We are adjourned at 8:29 PM. When minutes are ready in draft form, they'll again be put into Dropbox. I'll send in a note out just so that everyone can check with the link is appropriate.
I think that I can link emails when I put it in Dropbox.
You don't even need to because we all have access to it.
Oh, okay, but just to let them know they've been.
Yeah, 26.
They'll get notifications because everyone will get automated notifications
Oh,
about weekly.
if something's put in, okay,
Right,
perfect.
changes. And I'll send things out periodically from the official bylaw. You may have noticed when I send anything official out,
Aircraft
it comes
carriers.
from
I don't
the
know.
official
Destroys.
town
You're an
email
aircraft
address that we
carrier.
get assigned.
When did he retire?
So with that, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Bob.
Yeah.
Thanks, bye.
Yeah,
Thank you, everyone.
forever, you know.
I retired.
Thank you, bye.
I'm trying to think if they retired. Maybe it's about 10 years now. Maybe more than that.
Kevin, no.
Yep.
Kevin,
Joe.
Joe, sorry.
Tim,
Tim.
Tim.
you live at 6 Howard Street?
I do.
I used to live at 2 Howard Street.
You guys do.
Oh, wow, the corner. How?
Yeah, the corner.
About